So for this week's weekly weigh-in, let's take a look at those 3 steps again. We suggested, step 1, consider what is the nature of the barrier. Is it representation, action and expression, or engagement-based? Next, take a closer look at the checkpoint on udlcenter.org. And finally, determine an actionable, concrete way to apply the checkpoint. So this week's barrier was instructors are often frustrated with the awkwardness and slowness of trying to provide feedback in digital format. A couple of key words here. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that the end users in this particular barrier are actually the instructors, not the students. The students are the ones who are going to receive the feedback, but the instructor is the one who is experiencing the barrier. The second key word here, I think, is the word provide. So in this case, the act of provision is an action, is an expression, and therefore I think that this best fits with the action expression checkpoint. When we look at the UDL guidelines, therefore, we can focus in specifically on action and expression. As I do so, I might begin to hypothesize which of these checkpoints might best fit with addressing this barrier. I might hypothesize, for example, optimizing access to tools and assistive technologies might be a good fit, or using multiple media for communication, or use multiple tools for construction and composition. The next step is for me to go on to udlcenter.org and take a look at each of these and make sure that I choose one that is clearly a good fit, because again, what looks like might be a good fit in this very brief representation becomes less of a good fit when I more thoroughly understand that checkpoint. Let's take a look. So here I've returned to the Universal Design for Learning Center, udlcenter.org, and I've again gone to the UDL guidelines. This time I'm looking at the guidelines for action and expression, because that's what I identified as the nature of the barrier. So I suggested that maybe 4.2 would be a good fit. When I come and read about this, however, I found that 4.2 is really about assistive technologies. And though you might suggest that using some of the digital tools available on Canvas, etc., could be considered accessible assistive technologies, I don't think it's a great fit. It's not quite there. When I look, for example, at the Tell Me More, I see things that are specific assistive technology tools that are just not quite what I'm looking for. Let me look down a little bit more at the other two. I said possibly 5.1 or 5.2. 5.1 is about using multiple media for communication. In this case, providing feedback to students is indeed a form of communication. So it says here, unless specific media materials are critical to the goal, it is important to provide alternative media for expression. So as I think about this, is providing feedback in written format, for example, or typed digital format be important, or is the more important thing the fact that I'm giving students feedback? And I think in this case, the vehicle for the feedback is. So it's clear then that checkpoint 5.1 is the one that's most appropriate for use in this circumstance. I'm going to move forward with that then. So the nature of the barrier, instructors are often frustrated with the awkwardness and slowness of trying to provide feedback in the digital format. I identified as fitting best with checkpoint 5.1, use multiple media for communication, which is an action and expression checkpoint. Then I come up with a concrete solution. There could be multiple solutions for applying this, but in my case I decided to use podcast and/or audio-based feedback features of Canvas or otherwise to respond to student work. Notice that all 3 of these fit with the same principle of action and expression. It's an action expression barrier. We have an action expression checkpoint, and action expression strategy. All of it fits together under that same principle. Now let's take a look at what some people said this week. Steve said, using multimedia tools to provide feedback is not only easy, it's highly acceptable and accessible to all students. Using a tool like Audacity, a professor can quickly provide feedback to students' work simply by recording a short audio file. Another useful tool is Jing. Jing allows the user to provide audio and video feedback to students with the click of a button, a recording can be created, and with one more click, the feedback can be sent to the student. This is an excellent response, and it follows the same trajectory as what I was hypothesizing, moving through that action expression barrier checkpoint strategy. Fred had something very similar, saying instructors could use short audio or video clips of themselves giving feedback to their students in accordance with checkpoint 5.1, use multiple media for communication. More brief, but it's pretty much the same thing that Steve and I were saying. I think this is a great approach. Now, one thing that I don't want you to get the impression of is that there's a single right answer to these. There might be different ways to approach this. Jean, for example, approached this from a perspective of representation. He said if there is common feedback amongst many of the students, provide a discussion post, written or video, to share general comments with the class. Thus, you don't have to give the same feed multiple times. You can refer them to a discussion post for more detailed feedback. And this is checkpoint 3.2, highlight patterns, critical features, big ideas, and relationships. So I like this idea for those circumstances in which you do have the benefit of having certain problems that are coming up over and over in the student's work, certain things for improvement that are consistent. Then this could be a one-shot, give some big idea solutions for everybody all at one time, and thus can be significantly reductive for the labor that instructors must put into giving feedback. So this is a great idea. And note that it can be combined with what Fred and Steve and I were talking about, with then using the multimedia feedback also, whether the feedback given to the whole group or individual is text or multimedia. That flexibility is still pertinent. So, I'm just kidding. Good job. Now, let me look at a couple other examples where people had some really good ideas, but there are some things that can be clarified. So Rachel said, for example, in group work, using a Zoom session, instructors can use breakout sessions where students can create group work, then the instructor could go into each group and provide feedback for the group work. Zoom lets instructors type, giving an alternative for auditory information, let students speak over the microphone, giving an alternative to visual information, but students and the instructor can also share desktops and images. So Rachel is really tapping into the way that Zoom offers ways for both textual and visual representation and auditory representation of information. This is a great way to think about how a Zoom fits under the paradigm, the framework of universal design for learning. However, I'm not sure that these particular checkpoints fit the nature of the barrier. This is more about teacher-student interaction and less about how the instructor is providing feedback to the students. So it's not quite clear to me how that works. So make sure that when you choose the checkpoints and the solutions, that they all fit clearly with the nature of the barrier itself. Or here, Donna has another great idea where she says per checkpoint 3.2, which is, again, highlight patterns, big ideas, etc., be more proactive. The instructor should clearly communicate exactly how students will be graded. A rubric would help students to know what is expected from them. Hopefully, clearer communication will result in less confusion for the students, resulting in less need for detailed digital feedback later. I think this is an excellent idea, and it definitely fits with universal design for learning. However, proactively helping the students plan and prepare and direct their energies and efforts fits most closely with the concept of executive functions, which is covered by Guideline 6, provide options for executive functions, which belongs to the action expression. So that's checkpoint 6.1 through 6.4 would be under that guideline. So checkpoint 3.2 probably isn't a good fit for what Donna was going for here. Her strategy, however, is an excellent one. Again, her strategy could be combined with Fred and Steve's strategies, could be combined with Jean's strategies. A lot of these things can be used simultaneously to have a synergistic effect. And that's when we really begin developing settings in which there's so much flexibility that all students can learn. That's universal design for learning.